Hello, y'all. I am fortunate enough to be here speaking to you today with a fantastic speaker. But as always, I'm not going to steal your thunder. Greg, who are you and what are you doing here today?
I happen to be the son that was born to my mother. That's who I am. No, my moniker is the master negotiator and body language expert. I've written 7 books on the topic of negotiations and reading body language, along with having appeared as a TV host, a TV, call it everything from time to time, in order to provide more insights about negotiation and reading body language. And I've also appeared as the body language consultant on one of the TV reality shows. I won't tell you which one for right now.
Awesome. Well, and your website is themasternegotiator.com, and I did check out a little bit of it before we hopped on here. But how did you get into that? Because it's a very niche specific thing. I don't think you graduate from college, you say, hey, I want to be the master negotiator, mom. Let's do it. There's got to be a story there.
Well, actually, when I was a little kid, I observed my mother and my grandmother literally negotiate for everything because hey, we lived in an environment that wasn't extremely prosperous, is how I'll phrase it, and thus just watching them how to negotiate for everything and learning the value of which tactics to employ at any one given point in time was insightful. And as I grew older, I started learning more about how to negotiate. And as a TV news contributor for one of the networks, I was actually branded a body language expert also because I knew so much about reading body language. And I enhanced those skills along with going to Harvard to learn more about how to become a better negotiator, et cetera, et cetera. And even when I was in corporate America, I was the vice president of a division that had the highest margins in the company. The president asked me, so what are your folks doing differently that the other people are not doing? And I said, well, I've told them how to negotiate. So I did so for the whole company, and
Wow.
revenues increased substantially. And again, that led me down the path upon becoming a better negotiator. And then I just learned as much as I possibly could so that I could enhance my skills in order to pass those back to others.
Awesome. And so if it's all right with you, I'd like to dive into that a little bit more because I think it's super interesting how one thing that I notice a lot of speakers that I have on here that we discuss is the connection that you have with your audience when you're on stage and speaking on stage. So as a professional speaker, what role does body language and persuasion and negotiation have with your connection with your audience while you're on stage?
Excellent question, because a lot of speakers, some speakers, I should say, will focus so much on the message that they are supposed to be delivering that they forget about the audience. And that's something you cannot do. When I speak, no matter how large the platform is, I am scanning the audience, and I may pick out a small segment that's close enough for me to observe their body language, to see what type of reactions they have towards what I'm saying. Now, if somebody starts to go, I like that, just as an example, it's like, are they tired or are they being bored by my content? And I've literally, in smaller audiences, let's say those of less than 500, I've literally walked off the platform towards someone and observe their reaction just to wake them up, as it were. And people, as the speaker starts to walk towards them, people will go, oh, wait a minute, I don't want him to call on me. I don't want him to be messing with me. So they'll become more attentive. That can also send a signal to others in the audience. Hey, let's pay attention. But nevertheless, let's get back to the question you asked, because what I suggest speakers do is always observe through the body language of the audience how their presentation is actually landing. Now, once again, if people start getting up and walking out of the room, that says yet something else about your presentation style. Let me also tell you of one serious mistake I made when I was just in the burgeoning stages of my professional speaking career. I spoke for a client, and it was 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, and it happened to be in an environment where the folks had worked all day, and then the client was bringing me in to talk to these folks that were tired as heck already. I could see that in their faces. They were extremely, or they lacked interactivity to the degree that I said out loud, "Wow, client, boy, we need to get some coffee in here to actually wake these folks up." Well, actually, yeah, right. But that wasn't their fault. It was mine. As a speaker, we need to be able to shift. Okay, we have a set presentation. And by the way, I do what's now known as an interview style presentation, which means I'm able to interact with whomever poses any questions at all about negotiations and reading body language, such that I don't use slides or anything of that nature, which makes it more interactive, lively, and spontaneous. Well, when I actually said to the client, we need to get some coffee in here, as I said, I should not have been putting the onus on the audience. I should have been putting it on myself. And that's something I suggest to all speakers. If by chance the engagement is not happening that you seek from the audience, learn to shift modalities, do something differently. One thing I did try to do, a lot of times in my presentations, I will display perceived value versus real value. And what that means is I will have, let's say, $100 bill hidden behind something that appears to be, or something that appears to completely lack value. As an example, I've used CDs, and I offer them away for free. And one time a guy said, "Are you also going to give a CD player? Because nobody uses those things anymore." And I was highlighting the perception of value. And I said, "So am I to understand you do not want this?" He said, "No, thank you anyway." And everybody in the audience laughed. And I asked, "Well, does anybody want it?" And one lady actually raised her hand and said, "Yes, I'll take it. I'll take it. I know I'll find something to do with it." And I now here's something else for speakers. I passed it to someone that was sitting several rows in front of her so that they could pass it to other people, and other people are looking at whatever I'm passing, and you're getting more exposure just through that manner. But when it finally got to her, I said, "So, do you like what you have?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Can you just let everybody know what you have?" And she said, "Well, I have a CD." I said, "Open it, please." She opened it, and the $100 bill fell out. And I said, therein highlights the point. Never assume value simply because you perceive something to be what you perceive it to be, as opposed to understanding the full value of it. And I say that to say, when speakers cast their presentation to an audience, they need to make sure that the audience understands the perceived value that's really being had, as opposed to what the audience may perceive it to be.
That you bring up a really interesting point there with perceived value and actual value. And in sales, you hear, that's kind of the one of the core essences of sales. But as a speaker, how do you set up your gig, your actual engagement on stage with, so the audience, when you get on stage, they have they see you as a $100 bill instead of that CD, if that kind of makes sense.
Well, sure. First of all, it's all about positioning. In this case, for your question, what you can do is have, let's say, I've had CEOs of corporations actually interview me for their employees. I've had well known figures do the same thing to interview me, such that, number one, I'm borrowing credibility already because, hey, if the CEO is the one that's interviewing this guy, he must have something to say. That's just implied. You can also enhance your persona by asking questions ahead of time of the CEO that might be of most interest to the attendees. What is it that they can really gain value from that they'll be able to use instantly? And in some cases, I'll allow, through the CEO's admittance, to have people come to a microphone and pose their question live. Now, if I don't know what type of question someone may ask, and I'm able to answer it in a manner that satisfies whatever it is that they're seeking, that says something about my abilities also. Speakers, a lot of times, project a persona that people can perceive as being knowledgeable or lacking such. Even the way you present. You can notice sometimes I may speak with a more enhanced tonality in my voice. That is to convey a deeper sense of commitment, a deeper sense of knowledge, etc. As opposed to if we're talking on a webinar, now all of a sudden I'm moving away from the mic, I'm leaning back. Okay, that says something. Our body gestures emit signals that audiences either pick up at a subliminal level or at a state of consciousness. And speakers have to be aware of that. And it all comes in the way you position yourself before you ever step on the platform.
And when you see the audiences, as you say, in need of coffee, how do you get them that energy? How do you get them to go from a 4 or 5 energy level to a 9 or 8, where they will really be able to get the most value from your talk?
Well, now going back to that situation I mentioned before when that actually happened, I would have asked, hey guys, and by the way, depending upon where I speak in the world, I actually will ask ahead of time, is it okay to use the phrase guys? Because years ago, some women would get offended by that. One woman told me, I'm not a guy. But nevertheless, I would say, hey guys, let me know what I can do to actually make this of more value to you. Please help me out, or something like that. Now, you notice me getting playful at that particular point. And someone, let's say hypothetically, someone says, well, you can get this over with. And, if someone actually said that out loud, that would tell me something about the audience in particular, per that person feeling free enough to make such a statement. And I would then ask that person, hey, come up, please, and help me. Now, I've gotten that person involved. And now it's like the rest of the folks are going to go, whoa, wait a minute, what's getting ready to happen, And I never embarrass anyone, by the way. And I thank them for participating. And I'll tell them ahead of time, look, I'll ask you a few questions. What would you like me to ask you? And so I'm giving them the control, and I try my darndest to make them feel as comfortable as possible early on. And by doing that, I'm then not only engaging them, and apparently this person, like I said, to make such a statement, this person feels comfortable enough in doing so, and thus now the rest of the audience is right along with that particular individual. Plus that, again, people don't necessarily like to be pulled up on the stage, and so others know, well, I better pay more attention. I better get engaged or something, so he doesn't come out here and try to pull me up on the platform. So that's one thing I would have done differently.
Gotcha. And through your career, how many years has it been that you've been a professional speaker, consistently speaking on stage?
Oh my gosh, I've been a member of the National Speakers Association for 19 years, and I spoke semi-professionally, probably 10 years prior to that. So,
Wow.
and again, going back to the negotiation aspect, my motto is you're always negotiating. So even when speakers are on platforms, they have to realize what they say, how they look, how they actually perform will actually determine to what degree they'll get offers to speak on different platforms, how many might decline to bring that particular speaker in simply because the speaker was not on their game at that particular point in time. So that's something else that speakers have to be aware of. And one thing I want to talk about also is, let's say, compensation. I've had, let's say, organizations reach me and they'll ask, because this is nothing more than someone that was assigned the task of calling potential speakers for a gig, how much do you cost? And I'll go, well, first of all, let's reframe your question. I said, when clients bring me in to speak, it's an investment that they make. And sometimes I'll pause for dramatic effect, just like I just did a moment ago. It's an investment. And sometimes people will say, well, what's the difference? Well, an investment you get a return on. So therefore, it's not a cost. And some people will slow down because I've had situations where, as I said, people were just told to call to find out what's the cost to bring a speaker in. And I said, well, tell me more about the opportunity that you're speaking of. What are you looking for? What's the outcome? How many people might be involved? Well, how will the corporation's bottom line be enhanced by the exceptional presentation that I'm going to deliver? Now, you heard what I just said, right? The exceptional I'm using words to set the mindset per a paradigm shift in the individual that is called, simply because I want them to not only remember me, but paraphrase their thought process. And I will then extend an offer to assist them in prolonging, or I should say, preventing the prolonging of them having to call other speakers. I'll do that in some cases by saying, okay, tell me how I can help you. Well, what do you mean? What I'm saying is, you apparently don't feel overly enamored about calling all of these speakers. So tell me how I can help you. Oh, well, my boss told me to just call and find out how much speakers cost. And you're right, I don't want to do this. I said, well, do you know what the outcome that your boss is actually seeking as to why they are bringing in a speaker? Well, no, I don't even know that. So I get enough insight from them to then turn around and say, well, again, how can I help you? Now, the reason I ask, how can I help them, is because I need to know their perspective of what they're dealing with first before I try and offer a solution to solve their perspective. And once I get that information, I could, in some cases, I'll actually say, well, how about if you and your boss and myself get on a call just so I can, let's say, short stream this whole situation. I've even offered to call other speakers and say, hey, they're no longer looking for someone. I've offered that to a client from time to time too. So it's being perceived as someone of value. And the way you do that is how you position yourself.
Gotcha. And through these 39 years, it sounds like, what
Whoa, not
problems?
30, not 39, 29. Now, don't
Sorry,
make me
my
older than
bad.
I am.
My bad. Through these 29 years of experience on the speaker path, what problems have you encountered, and how have you leveraged your expertise in negotiation to solve these problems, and these problems that you've had that probably other professional speakers have as well, that they're struggling with right now and not totally sure or aware that negotiation could even be a way that they could solve this?
Well, let's start with doing a proposal. Oh, when I was in the younger aspects of my career, it was like, hey, if somebody knocked on the door and they asked for a proposal, bam, it was like, oh, I'm off to the races type thing. Well, I stopped doing that years and years and years ago. The reason being, a lot of times you'll have organizations that are shopping, and you put a proposal together. In some cases, in the early parts of my career, I'd never hear a word after submitting the daggone thing, which would have turned out and did turn out to be a lot of wasted time and effort. So in today's environment, someone actually calls, and here's something else. I have a degree of perceived expertise literally throughout the world. And thus now I get clients that call as a result of being referred by somebody else, yada, yada, yada. So I don't have to go through the proposal process anyway. But I still stopped doing so years ago because I realized not only was it a waste of time, but you need to know more if you are going to engage in the proposal as to whom it is that will be making the decisions. What's the process that it will undergo? So, will a committee look at it? Will two or three people look at it? And my thought process becomes, how can I influence those if I were to do it? And that's the thing. If you don't know more about what's going to occur after you sit down and put the time and effort into writing the proposal, you should not do it. Well, Greg, if I don't do the proposal, I won't get the opportunity to speak. Yeah, true. But guess what? Every opportunity that you perceive as such is not necessarily such. And thus, be mindful of how you are going to utilize your time. That's your most precious asset in the world. And therefore, if people offer you something and you don't think it's right, don't accept it. Early on, also, as I said, if somebody knocked on the door in the early days of my speaking career, it was like, I'm off to the races. Can you talk about how small business owners can actually perform better marketing functions? Yes. Can you talk about how race car drivers might tune up a car. Yes. You know,
Mhm.
you ask me a question. Yes, I could do it. And then I go look up if it was something that was outside of my realm. I go look up how I might be able to achieve it. Well, guess what? You scatter yourself in that direction and in that many pieces, you'll never be whole. Pick out what you're good at, focus on that, and then set about targeting potential clients and prospects that can utilize your service. That way, you position yourself such that they already have a sense of value about what you bring to the table. And you don't have to go through this whole process of, well, my normal fee is $10,000, but I'll take 1,000 if you bring me in today or
Right.
something like that, sounding cheap.
Right. And are you familiar with a guy named Chris Voss?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
I
I
kind of
figured.
laugh, but yeah, exactly. Chris and I have had some exchanges over time, so that's
Oh,
why I
like
always,
how are those? How'd they go?
well, it was, as you know, he talks about never splitting the difference. And the
Yeah.
conversation that I can recall that, well, it was an exchange, I should say, was okay, you may not split the difference, but you can split the difference between the difference. And now
Hmm.
there was so much within that that was rich. It's somewhat profound because if you're splitting the difference between the difference, you're splitting the difference. You get what I'm
Oof.
saying? Yeah,
Yeah.
you're splitting the difference. But Chris used that as a positioning. Here we go back with that again, as a way to position his persona a little better. And I never attack other people, speakers, or whatever. I love to uh, partake and joyful banter from time to time. And that's what that was. Because here's something else about splitting the difference from a negotiation perspective. If you and I are talking about me delivering a gig, I'm at 50,000 as an example, and let's say you have 30,000 in your budget for me and you offer me 30, and I'd ask you, well, how did you come up with your budget of $30,000? Now, if you start giving me insights about, well, we have $150,000 for the whole venue, and we've set aside 30,000, I would ask, well, that's interesting. So, where are you placing your emphasis on the venue or the speaker that can deliver value that will allow you to shine per what your attendees receive and the information that's going to be dispersed? And the person will go, well, that's a good thought. Well, the committee came up. Now, did you hear that? The committee. Now I all of
Hmm.
a sudden know that there are more folks involved. Uh,
Hmm.
the committee came up with the $30,000 sum because they felt as though that would be good compensation for a speaker of your caliber. I go, tell me more. Now, I want them to talk because the more they talk, the more they're going to divulge. The more they divulge, the better I can then position myself per getting them off of that 30,000 and closer to the 50. Okay. So let's say after several minutes of conversation, they say, well, you know, how about if we just split the difference like that? And I'll ask, okay, now, hey, I'm not the sharpest tool in the drawer, but by all means, I know splitting the difference between 30 and 50 is 40. Okay. But still, I would ask, well, tell me what you mean. Because some people may have a different perspective, and you always want to know what someone means whenever they extend an offer, especially as a professional speaker when you're talking about your compensation. So let's say they say, well, 40,000. And I'd say, well, are we talking about dollars? Make a little lightheartedness of it. And they'll say, yes, 40,000. Now, splitting the difference, at that particular moment, we are no longer talking about 30,000 and 50,000. At that moment, we're now talking about 40,000 and 50,000, simply because they offered to split the difference. If you're on the extending end as a speaker, the better way to position that is to say, if we can do XYZ, complete the contract today, whatever it is that you're trying to bargain for, can we go to $40,000? I mean, get a commitment. If the person says no, well, you take it off the table because the if statement has already positioned you to do so. Here's one other thing. If by chance you happen to be 30 and $50,000 apart, and most speakers know this already, you can then look for other ways to enhance your compensation by asking about the number of books that the client wants to buy in order to, again, allow the audience to take you home, extend their knowledge after you've spoken. Now, you can put that in the form of an assumptive question. You don't ask, would you like to purchase some books also for attendees? Instead, you would say, and in the form of an assumptive question, how many books would you like to purchase? The assumption being, hey, you're going to purchase books, right? Type of thing. And that will also give them something else to think about. The point is, as you, as a speaker, add more perceived value to whatever it is that the client or the prospect is willing to bring you in, you increase their perception of you for the value you will add. And you are and should be compensated for that if you position yourself appropriately.
Love that. That is a huge value bomb right there. So for your path as a professional speaker, how have you gone about going from the starting speaking fee you've had and your skills of negotiation, and then slowly or very rapidly, whatever was your case, increasing that fee by leveraging your negotiation skills? Because for speakers, that skill of negotiation, it might seem so simple, but if knowing and really nailing that one skill can be the difference between you getting paid $30K for a 45-minute talk and $50K, that skill can be worth $20K every month, right? And so that's why it's super relevant to speakers. So that's why I ask, how did you go about using that for negotiating your fee throughout your career as a speaker?
Well, the School of Hard Knocks taught me a lot, first of all, because sometimes I would say things along the lines of somebody would call and I would say, they would ask, how much do I cost? And I would say in the early stages, well, 5,000. Now, I mean, you heard that. You heard all of that. It's like, are you sure? Type of thing. So I learned to say it with confidence, first of all. And seriously, when I started off, I was making less than 1K per presentation. And to say 5, it was like, wow, okay, let me look myself in the mirror. Okay, I could do this. I could do this. 5. Didn't feel good. 5. I had to practice first to get to that point. Then I had to also begin to feel comfortable with having asked for 5K and delivering on that perspective to the point that the client felt there was value there. And again, it's a building process. You go from 5 to 750 to 10,000 to 15, whatever. Now, the books, in my case, helped me raise the investments that clients made to bring me in also. Because again, those books that I've written, all 7 of them, were like little agents constantly circling around and saying, hey, look at what this guy's doing. Look what he's done. Oh my gosh, he must have some knowledge. People perceive folks as being knowledgeable anytime they write a book. And I had 2 of my books translated into 4 or 5 different languages, and literally just had a foreign agent reach out to me a few days ago to ask if it could be translated into Uzbek, which
Interesting.
is Uzbekistan. Yeah, exactly. So again, now that will set the groundwork whereby in the future, and I already said to the agent, well, tell me about what you have in mind for speaking engagements. Again, use that assumptive question process. And they said, well, we hadn't thought about it, but it's something that now we will think about. And I said, well, and when might you let me know an answer to that? Again, you're pushing gently such that you position yourself so that you can get bigger engagement. And they're aware of my speaking investments that clients bring me in at within the United States and other parts of the world. I've never spoken in that part of the world, so the speaking investment would definitely be even more than I receive for having to travel there, yada, yada, yada type of thing.
And how do you go about saying yes or no to a speaking opportunity these days where you've kind of done it all? You got the speaker set, you got the 7 books, you're already, pulling in a 50K speaking gig fee per gig. Like you said, your time is your most valuable resource that you have. How do you go about choosing when and where you allot that time for new speaking gigs?
Well, now I have a lot of projects going on. So I will literally say, I appreciate the offer. I really do. I have a lot going on right now. When might you want this to occur? Okay. You know what? I'll check my calendar to see if we can make this happen. Just out of curiosity, though, you already know what the investment is. To what degree are you willing to invest slightly more so that I can interrupt my current activities to address whatever it is that you would have me do? Again, put the onus back on them. And you mentioned the 50K. I'm using hypothetical numbers because that's something else that we're not supposed to do as professional speakers, talk about
Sure.
fees out loud type thing. So I'll put the onus back on them. And in some cases, I've gotten an extra 20, 30,000 K just as a result of doing just that. Because again, you don't want to place yourself in a position where you're viewed as a commodity. That's number one. Number two, you want to position yourself such that, hey, I'm not just waiting for you to call me. Okay. I do have other activities that I'm engaged in. So if you want to do business, hey, I can be had at a price type of thing. And you explore to see what offers they actually make you. And truth be known, I do have a lot of activities going on. So I will turn down offers, especially if they are not at the normal investment that clients will make. But I will attempt to help that particular prospect and or in some cases clients by telling them, I know someone that is excellent that could actually serve your needs right now. And they may be in the range that you're willing to make per the investment to have them come in and speak. Would you like me to reach out to them first? And if they say yes, I can get back to you? Again, I'm positioning myself as a value add, even if I can't address the situation today, because one never knows how one's luck will turn out. And one day you may be like, okay, I'll take that 20K gig. Yeah, for daggone sure. So you always, even in a negotiation, you want to leave the door open such that people can come through it again, as opposed to closing it and locking that bad boy shut.
And how much do you think professional speakers that haven't gotten a grip on their own negotiation skills are losing per year because they don't have that skill?
Oh my gosh. I mean, undeterminable. Seriously. Because in some cases, let's say your rate is 5K and someone calls you, a prospect calls, and they say, I'd like to bring you in to speak. What's your fee? And you say 5K. And the person goes, 5K? And you go, well, I could do 3. Meanwhile, in their mind, they were willing to start off at 10. Start off at 10. And now not only have you dropped it to 5, now you're going down to 3. Now there's another sense that they will have about your ability to deliver simply because you dropped too fast, number one, and you were lower than what they were even willing to pay. By them being willing to pay you at 10K, they had a perspective of where your skill levels were and your ability to deliver. You have somewhat diminished that by number one, giving them that 5K, and then number two, even digging a deeper hole for yourself by dropping it to 3. I always say, try your darndest to get information from the prospect that calls before giving information. And the way to do that is to probe. Tell me more about the opportunity. What are you trying to achieve as a result of bringing a speaker in of my caliber? To whom else have you spoken thus far? How many other speakers do you have to call? The more information you can gather, the better, again, you can position yourself, which will allow you to receive more income as a result of being a professional speaker and delivering quality content. If you don't negotiate that for yourself, you're only hurting yourself.
Love it. Awesome. And is there any last tips or pieces of advice that you've been able to accumulate over the past few decades that you think would be valuable for the aspiring speaker, the professional speaker, the business owner who speaks to grow their business to know?
Yes, and I will encapsulate it by finishing off what we were literally just talking about. My tagline is, you're always negotiating. And what that means is the way you position yourself today determines the opportunities or lack of that will come your way tomorrow. And thus, I would strongly suggest anyone that is interested in becoming or enhancing their speaking career become a better negotiator for daggone sure. Because unless you do, you will miss opportunities, some that will never even display themselves to you simply because you did not know how to position yourself.
Love it. Where can they find you on the internet if they've been getting so much value and they're feeling, oh, I need to learn how to negotiate. I need to learn more from this guy. Where can I find Greg on the internet?
Well, first of all, you can go to my website, which is, as you mentioned earlier, themasternegotiator.com. That's TheMasternegotiator.com. I can be found on LinkedIn also. And look for me on LinkedIn under Greg Williams, The Master Negotiator. I can also be reached via email at Greg, Greg, at themasternegotiator.com. And by all means, on my website, I write blog posts I have hundreds of blog posts up there about negotiation tactics, strategies, and they're free. So by all means,
Wow.
just go there and partake, because that's my mission right now, to give back to as many people such that their lives become enhanced as a result of me doing so.
I know I'm going to be doing some of that. Well, awesome. Greg, thank you for taking the time to actually be here and share this value. And I think that's even helped me realize that how important negotiation is. And I kind of knew a little bit before, but the way you frame that, the difference between a 30K fee and a 50K fee just by that one skill. You want to talk about an ROI for a skill, you got it right there. All right, guys. Thank you for making this happen, Greg, and we will be in contact. Cheers, y'all.
Thank you.